Hey, Japan on Film fans! Welcome to the first video episode. This is actually not one of our regular episodes. This is a special. So the other day, I was contacted by a representative of Takeshi Fukunaga, who's the director of a brand new movie that's just coming out on Netflix this week, as I'm recording this, called Ainu Mosir, and it already came out in Japan last month, October 17th, I believe it is, in select theaters. And they reached out to me because I guess they found the podcast and they wanted to know if I wanted to have Mr. Fukunaga on the show to kind of to help promote his movie. So naturally, I was more than happy to be able to do that. So they gave me a chance to see the movie. I was able to see it and sit down with the director and speak with him for about 30 minutes or so. So this is just like kind of a little special bonus episode. Please make sure you. I hope you enjoy it, and please make sure you check out Ainu Mosir when it comes out. Again, it's going to be on Netflix in most English-speaking territories. So if you've got Netflix, then go watch it right there. If you're in Japan, it's out in a theater, hopefully near you. Otherwise, there are VPNs and stuff like that, so use one of those and to watch the movie. It's a great film, and I had a lot of fun talking with him. So I hope you enjoy this, and we will begin with our new season with all of the video episodes as well as audio coming real soon. Welcome to the Japan on Film podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and I'm very excited here. Got a very special guest. He's just out with a brand new movie, and he's a Japanese film director, and that is Takeshi Fukunaga. Takeshi, how are you today? It's very nice to meet you. I'm very glad you agreed to come and join on.
Nice to meet you, Perry. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So the movie we're talking about is Ainu Mosir. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just got a chance to watch it last night. It came out in Japan actually about a month ago at the time we're recording this, and it should be coming out within the next day or so on Netflix in English speaking territories. And I just watched this movie last night. Wonderful movie, very moving picture. But before we jump into talking about that, I wanted to talk a little bit about you first. So could you give us a little bit about your background?
My background, I'm born and raised in a small town in Hokkaido, Japan, and I was there until up until I graduated high school. And short after that, I moved to US and lived there until mainly in New York. Lived there for 16 years up until last summer, and made my first feature. It was about a Liberian immigrant coming to New York and becomes a cab driver to have a better life. And I was released through SRA, which is also the distribution company for this new movie, AINU MOSIR. And so, yeah, I mean, I finished. That was just finished this year, and then I'm super excited to release it to on Netflix, and then to show it to the world.
Great. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your background. So, what was it like? Why did you choose to make your first movie about Liberian immigrants in New York and the cab driver? I haven't seen that movie myself, but I was actually just reading about it right before we started recording.
I was first involved with a documentary project about the same subject matter, which was rubber plantation, about the workers in rubber plantation in Liberia. And then I was, really struck by how to know how the our daily product, which is rubber, is made, based on like those like workers really hard work, and then that which I had no idea about. And then prior to that, I was trying to make a movie about immigrant in New York. And then I saw, by connecting those two words, and then make it as an immigrant story. I thought we could show the lives, and then struggles behind the things we use, and people we meet every day.
So, what drew you to film in the first place? What was it that made you want to become a director and a writer?
um just be by being a big movie fan, I
Mhm.
guess. Like While I was in Japan, I never thought I could make one because like making a movie seemed such a kind of difficult thing that I didn't think I could you know do myself. But after moving to US and then seeing like students like kind of expressing themselves freely, and then and then kind of fearlessly, I thought maybe I could try it as well.
Yeah,
And
and New
but
York's a great place for that. They've got a long history of encouraging independent filmmaking and guerrilla filmmaking and that sort of thing. So I can definitely understand how you would how that environment would definitely fuel your creative desires.
Mhm. Yeah, that was a huge encouragement. I mean, just by seeing those people who are trying to, do their best,
Mhm.
to express themselves. And looking back, I don't know if I, became a filmmaker if I didn't move to US and
Mhm.
seeing those people.
Okay, cool. And now you're from Hokkaido, which, for people who aren't aware, Hokkaido is one of the original islands that the Ainu were indigenous to, and as well as the Kuril Islands and part of northeastern Honshu, I believe, as well. So, what was your inspiration for making Ainu Mosir? Did you have a connection with Ainu from growing up in Hokkaido, or was it some other impulse that made you want to make this movie?
Growing up in Hokkaido, I didn't really have much interaction with Ainu people because one, there wasn't really enough education about Ainu people and then their culture and history, and two, even let's say even there are some Ainu people I kind of encountered with, like my classmates and
Mhm,
such. They never kind of openly spoke about their backgrounds, because of the tough history they've been through, which is getting better and better, but still there are some like prejudice and
mhm,
stereotypes against Ainu people. Um, and it was only I after I moved to US and seeing all different kinds of people kind of expressing themselves in their own ways, and then talking about different issues, and including like Native American, and
mhm,
then like all those discussions surrounding their rights and history, being exposed to that was finally made myself realize that I haven't really learned anything about indigenous people in my in Hokkaido, which is the land I was born into and grew up in.
mhm,
And then there are only a few narrative feature films made about Ainu,
mhm.
and historically every time it was made, it was Japanese actors who played Ainu roles. So,
Yeah, that's true. The most significant one that comes out into my mind in recent memory is Lee Sung Il's version of Unforgiven, which had a very heavily featured Ainu subplot. But again, in that, like you said, they were all played by native Japanese actors. They weren't played by indigenous Ainu actors.
yes, in that particular movie, actually, there are a few extras
Oh, okay.
for Ainu roles that played by real Ainu people, but like they didn't have any like speaking roles. Like
Hmm.
the main character was played by a Japanese actor.
Right.
So seeing those kind of like history, I thought like making a movie about Ainu, starring Ainu people is something that's meaningful to do.
Hmm.
And then, so it took me some time, but it's finally made and then out into the world this year.
Yeah, and continuing on that, I also read that you worked with the Ainu cast to help develop the story. Is that correct?
hmm
So tell me a little bit about that process. What was that like?
like I to start working on this movie, I first I just went to different parts of Hokkaido, and I met different Ainu people, and then learned about them by listen to them really. And then as I developed, decided to shoot the film in the town called Akan, and then work with those known actors, who actually live there, you know, getting their advice and you know, like bringing as much reality into the story and film was a key, approach, that I took, to really avoid, making any mistakes, like imposing like preconceived ideas on, a portrayal of those people. And um so, like it was first the first time for them to be heavily involved with film production,
Mhm.
like not only just, acting in it. So, there are many things that, that kind of both of us, brought to the table to make it work. But without their help, especially, I mean, creatively speaking, especially one of the main characters, Debo,
Mhm.
without his help, I couldn't have made this movie.
Debo was a wonderful addition to the movie. He had such a presence on screen, and he was just such a great character and such a well drawn character. I was particularly struck by the scene when they're all, and I don't want to spoil anything too much for because I want people to go and see the movie themselves. But there's one scene where they're having a meeting with like the everyone with the people in town, and they're talking about the ritual, which again I don't want to tell too much about it, but and he has this whole speech he gives about struggling with his identity, like he talks about how he's Ainu, but he's not really sure what that means. And the other people mentioned the fact that this ritual it could harm the tourism industry, and I was really struck by that because there's a lot of this and it does a really good job of showing the double-edged sword that cultural tourism has, where on the one hand it is helping to preserve this culture, but on the other hand there's almost a voyeuristic nature to it, such as when we see the reporter played by Lily Frankie, which I was very very excited to see him in it too. By the way, just as a side note, I love Lily Frankie. But in addition to that, the other guy who comes in to record the grandmother singing, and she clearly doesn't want to, right? She's got this and then later you see her singing just fine on her own. So you really get the sense that there's this voyeuristic aspect, and some of them feel like it's almost a way of cheapening their culture, but at the same time it does also preserve the culture. So I thought that was a very interesting way to represent it, and it doesn't really condemn or condone one way or the other, but it just shows that it's this very complex issue that's facing not only the Ainu, but other marginalized cultures that are slowly disappearing in society and in the world.
Yeah, true. And it is very, very complicated. And then I don't mean to, like state a definite answer to that, to such a complicated issue. But I hope to raise, questions about, these situations. And then like it was described in the movie, they have this, struggle between trying to be true to their culture, and then kind of in a way like making a living by showing the kind of, one side of the culture. And while living, day-to-day life just like every other Japanese person. And so, to I thought, to kind of tell a story about Ainu people living today's society, there are so many different sides to it. And then the Akan as a town and its community kind of embodies those important themes, because that the whole town works as a tourism. And then that's, like you say, like that's how they make living, and that's how makes things complicated. But also that's how they can keep their tradition and culture alive, which isn't really available for most of other places. There are some like museums that people who work and then can make a living by learning the culture, and then performing their traditional arts and craft. But they're it's very, very rare. So most of people very basically have to live there take a regular job and then do kind of cultural activities on the side,
Mhm.
which is disconnected to kind of a financial activity.
Yeah, and that also ties into the whole the assimilation aspect, which Meiji era Japan forced on the Ainu when they kind of forced them to assimilate, to abandon their Ainu names and their Ainu traditions, and so there is that. There's also an interesting thing I noticed with Kanto being kind of like stuck between these two worlds, where it's not that he hates his Ainu side, but he's also got problems dealing with the culture and being considered Ainu. Like the one scene stuck out to me when they're the Japanese customers in his mother's store, and they tell his mother like, "Oh wow, your Japanese is so good," and she just kind of has this look on her face. Well, yeah, of course it is. That really stood out to me. It also spoke to me all as an immigrant in Japan, having had that phrase spoken to me a lot, many times before. But also, you see Kanto come in, and just the look on his face, where you get the sense that this isn't the first time that
Hmm.
he's dealt with this. The actor who played him, who's also his same names, but he did such a good job with just his facial reactions and just the way he shows these emotions and what's going on in his head. He really portrays it in a wonderful way on his face, I thought. And just there's this, because there's that scene where he goes into the forest with, I think it was an uncle or some other family friend, and then he does the ritual for welcoming greeting the mountain that Debo taught him. And so he does feel this connection to the Ainu culture, but at the same time it's also that question of, you know when tradition clashes with modernity, with the modern era, and where he's trying to stop this ritual for reasons I'm not going to get into because I don't want to spoil the movie. But I also thought that was an interesting thing, where it's showing that tradition has its own kind of downside as well.
Yeah, it's I think it's a universal question, to like each one of us, is dealing with it in one way or another. Like for example, like as a Japanese person, I don't know how to wear a kimono in the in a traditional way,
Mhm.
but but someone else is doing it, and then I do, preserving those culture, and then that's definitely, without me practicing it, it's a big part of my identity.
Mhm.
And then and for the for Ainu, the situation is much, how to say, it's more urgent, like the number of people are, obviously the population is lower, and the language is one of the endangered languages around the world.
Mhm.
And then so they are, they feel urged to keep the tradition, but some of them don't necessarily, um, doesn't necessarily make sense in the modern life. So it becomes a question of why do we keep this, and then what's the, how do we keep it, and are we, you know f- and then but then there are all these questions and opinions that even varies within the
Mhm.
animal community. And then I so like by including the ritual as one of the main story elements, was my intention was to show that different sides of it through the ritual, different sides of different opinions, different feelings, different ideas. And then through that I thought I could like show who they are, and then what they deal with today.
Mhm. Very, very, yeah, very interesting. I was also, in some ways, I know Ainu is an indigenous culture, but there are a lot of similar themes to immigration stories. I felt as well, like I mentioned with the scene with the Japanese couple complimenting his mother on her Japanese ability. Also, there's the scene when he's with his friends and they're in this band and they talk about writing their own original songs. And one of the kids says, "Well, I don't want to use Ainu instruments, right? I don't want
Mhm.
to do anything that's connected with Ainu." And Kanto has some of that with him too. Like when he says that he wants to leave Akan and go anywhere because if he stays in Akan, they make you do quote unquote Ainu things.
Mhm.
And I kind of I related to that to an extent, not only being an immigrant in Japan, but also being a child of immigrants in America. I was there's this kind of almost fear of embracing your cultural roots in some ways, because I remember one time when I was a kid and we had some cultural festival and I had been encouraged to wear traditional Greek dress because Greek clothing because my mother's family is from Greece, and I remember the other kids laughing at me for it because it had like a skirt type element to it. And just afterwards, when I was an elementary school student at the time, afterwards, just feeling really ashamed of my
Mhm.
culture because it got made fun of that way. And I felt I hadn't thought about that situation in decades, but watching this movie, it made me connect back to that part of myself, and I thought those were some very powerful themes that you managed to present in the movie.
Oh, thank you. Like the film touches on many complicated, themes and issues, but at the end of the day, it's the story is about Kanto, this like a
Hmm.
14-year old, junior high school boy who, it happens to be Ainu, but before that he's a boy who is trying, making the steps to adulthood, and then
Hmm.
trying to kind of fill the gap between who he is and what he wants to do, and what other adults around him tell him to do, or what he has to do, and what he feels like he should be doing. And then, so I hope, like, although there are those, like, serious issues and such,
Hmm.
but like, it's I hope to, by making it as a coming of age story, I thought, I hope to kind of make it more available to wider audience, and then make it more relatable, to different audiences with different backgrounds.
Yeah, I definitely felt that. I felt Kanto was extremely relatable for that, because you do see that he is, just this boy struggling to kind of figure out what he wants to do, where he wants to go now that he's on the verge of finishing junior high school. Which, for listeners who don't know, the compulsory schooling in Japan is at the end of junior high school, and then most people do go on to senior high school, but you have the option of doing it either a local one or like kind of like a preparatory type school and that sort of thing as well. So just for a little cultural mentions there. Um, I love that this movie is dealing with identity and it's presenting it in this way because one of the ongoing myths that a lot of people have about Japan is that it is a homogenous society when more accurately it really is a multi-ethnic society with an ethnic Japanese majority, but and that's even pushed by elements of the Japanese government. Taro Aso infamously said years ago that Japan has one race and one culture. When really you look into it, not only the Ainu but the Zainichi Koreans, you have the descendants of people who are working in Brazil, and just all the immigrants from China, from Southeast Asia, from all over the world, and lots of people have come over from the Philippines as well. So there are all these different elements, and it's just that a lot of people they're not really talked about. And
Right.
I think it's great to that we see movies like this where you're giving these communities and these people a voice.
Right. Thank you for that. I mean, like, yes, it's the awareness, around, on the true, diversity in Japan is very, unfortunately, is very, very low, and even not just those, like, like, Japanese people, main, most of Japanese people, but also, people in Hokkaido,
Mhm.
don't really know much about Ainu, or don't really haven't really paid much attention to Ainu until recently. Um, but the diversity, both ethnically, culturally, has been here, from the origin of this
Hmm.
country. There are people like who's been including, well, not, I shouldn't say including, well, there are people who are basically ancestors of, Ainu and Japanese people who's been living in the land of Japan. And then there are, people from mainland China and South Korea, moved to Japan with, new culture and then technology. And then, so that Japan as a culture and the Japanese as a people has been mixed with those two
Hmm.
types of people. And so, it's been here, the diversity, but because of many political aims and different reasons, that historical fact hasn't really been taught in Japan. And as a result of that, people are still hasn't paid much enough attention to the diversity and then different group of people in Japan.
Yeah, absolutely. Very well said. So, what has the reception been like? Because the movie's been out for about a month now in Japan, and I know it's gotten some good reception at film festivals and the like. What have people been saying to you about the movie, both in Japan and outside of Japan?
Outside Japan, I haven't been able to, get so much reactions because I haven't been able to travel to festivals, because of the COVID-19
Mhm.
situation. And then it's been only, some people from like a festival programmer and such. So I'm hoping to, really get, more reaction once it's out on Netflix. But in Japan, the reception has been really, really great. Many of them say they learned a lot about Ainu and then who they are, today, and then what it's like to, live as Ainu today. But also just, as a movie, I heard, a lot of people, came up to me and say how much they are moved, by the beauty of the culture, and then,
Mhm.
the main, and then there are many comments, especially on Kanto, how, wonderful he is in the movie.
Yeah, he was a wonderful actor. Also, I wanted to ask as well, what were some of the kind of your influences when you're thinking about from a directing point of view or even a writing point of view? What are some of the who are some of the people that you kind of look up to, either within Japanese cinema or outside of Japanese cinema?
There are so many, but as a in Japanese cinema, the director I respect the most is Shohei Imamura.
Hmm.
Uh, how, he taps onto kind of, socially conscious themes or characters or setting, but turns it into a great, film, both artistically and also kind of as an entertainment,
Hmm.
and then how he always try to portray kind of common people, and then the people in the rather in the minority groups.
Hmm.
um so I, respect him and love his movies for that. Outside of that, well, again, there are many, but Michelangelo Antonioni films I love, and then Ichandon, like his movie, especially Oasis,
Hmm.
was a huge movie for me.
Okay, great, great. And one more thing I wanted to ask you is, I noticed on your website it says that you're currently developing your third feature project. Is there anything you can say about that?
Um, just a little bit about it. So I moved to, Tokyo last summer, and then one of the main reasons for that is to develop the next film in Japan. And so that's my sort of feature project, and then that takes place in Tohoku, Japan. It's a northern part of that main island, and it's a period piece, so
Mhm.
it's a lot more fiction than my first two films. It doesn't really have much of a documentary aspect, or working with no actors. But this, thematically, it's about common people, and then taps into kind of Japanese original animism, which is the base
Hmm.
of Japanese original religion Shinto,
Hmm.
and then also kind of very peculiar nature of Japanese people, like how they can be, the harmony is important aspect, but while keeping that, or valuing that, they sometimes they can be very severe against people who sticks out. So it's kind of like that. I mean,
And some connections too, because there's also a lot of animism in Ainu culture as
Mhm.
well. So and that was definitely very well portrayed in Ainu Mosir too. I felt. Um, so what's your big takeaway? What do you really hope people learn from watching this movie?
Hmm. Hmm. It's hard to. There are so many, thoughts and hopes, in the movie. But I mean, first I want people to, of course, enjoy the movie, and then feel and think something after it. But like there are, of course, like I hope for a lot more people to know and then understand more about Ainu, but this isn't everything about Ainu people.
Hmm.
It's just a small part of it, and then so like I hope people watch it, and then after knowing a little bit about them, Ainu, they can take on their own journey to learn more, and then pay more attention to Ainu and then issues around surrounding them.
Hmm.
But on a human level, the ritual that's one of the core in the story in this movie is about, at the end of the day, appreciating, showing appreciation towards the life that we are receiving.
Hmm.
And then one Ainu person I know told me one day that, in a nutshell, Ainu culture and spirituality is all about appreciation. And then so that ritual also embodies that, and then that's something that we is something that's easy to forget, for us in living in modern life, how we can go to supermarket and
Hmm.
buy meat and fish that someone killed, and but we never have to deal with it. And then kind of that so that's that ritual, and then I know culture, I think, can give an opportunity for us to learn about the importance of having that kind of appreciation.
I picked up on that too, because you do mention that there's that scene when they're talking about the ritual, and one of the men mentions how, well, we buy stuff, we buy meat at the supermarket, and
Mhm.
it's the same thing, but it's there's that disconnect there, and when they're confronted with that, it ends up becoming something very a lot more powerful and a lot more personal,
Yeah.
um it's just overall it's just a wonderful movie. It's a great coming of age story. Kanto is amazing in it. Debo is amazing in it. It's very well written, well crafted, beautifully shot. Like the way you convey the small town feel and just like the surroundings of everything. Like I've never been to Hokkaido actually, but I felt like I was there. It felt very familiar just watching the way you filmed it all. It was wonderfully done.
Thank you. Like a big part of that was by the great DP Sean Price Williams. He really captured the beauty of people, and then the beauty of the nature, amazing nature in Akan, Hokkaido.
Okay. So I think that's about all the questions I have that I'd like to ask you today. Um, just overall, I want to thank you for agreeing to come on here. I want to thank you for giving me a chance to see the film. I absolutely loved it. And I teach a class in Japanese cinema, and I think I'm going to have to incorporate this into my syllabus next year because it's just so well done, it's so well made, and I want more. All my students are Japanese, so I definitely want more of them to see this. And one of the issues I try to convey in my classes with them is this idea that there's a lot more to Japanese culture than what's usually portrayed, what they usually believe. So I want to thank you for doing that. And if you're ever down in Kagoshima, give me a call and I'll take you out for a shochu.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. I haven't been to Kyushu actually. I've been to Okinawa, but never been stepped in Kyushu. So yeah, I love that.
Okay, great. All right, so that does it for this special bonus episode of Japan on Film. Again, Takeshi, I want to thank you so much for coming on. Make sure everyone, please, to go watch Ainu Mosir. It's going to be on Netflix if you're in English-speaking countries. If you're in Japan, which I know some of you are, it's already out in the theaters, I believe, or it should be out on video here soon. So please make sure you find a way to watch this movie. And Takeshi, if you had any final thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Oh no, you pretty much said everything. I mean, I just hope people, as many people as possible, will have a chance to watch it, and then I just want people to just first watch it as just a universal coming of age story, not necessarily as Ainu movie, and then but there's so much of that in the movie, but at first it's I hope I think it's something that many people can relate to.
I think a lot of people will. I think you'll find that the reception to it's going to be very positive. I got a very good feeling about what this movie's potential is. So you should be very proud of you created a great work of art here. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks so much for listening to this special episode of Japan on Film. And please make sure to visit the website, japanonfilm.com, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. And I will be back soon with another one of our regular episodes. And until then, I'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching this episode of Japan on Film. If you want to get more of our videos, see more of our discussions about Japanese movies, then just subscribe down below. Also, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave us a review. Let people know what you think. If you go to japanonfilm.com, you can sign up to actually be on the show. Just let me know what you want to talk about, and I'd be more than happy to have you. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you next time.